So there was an opportunity to go back home to Victoria this time because the lab was without a director and there was nobody there, and this was perfect for me because I wanted to, build something. And so off we went. And I would commute to Vancouver for clinics, and I persuaded the molecular lab there to set up testing for SCA3, as it was called then, and that included SCA1 and eventually SCA2. My colleagues who were involved in all of this were from initially Jorge Sequeiros, who's here, who was training with Victor McCusick and his team in Baltimore at Hopkins. And he would come to these clinics, and that's how we got to know one another. And we collaborated on a number of issues. And we involved some other people, one of whom was Marie Boutet, who was a medical anthropologist. And she had done some nursing in Brazil and was fluent in Portuguese. So she came to see what we were doing in these clinics. And one thing led to another, and she decided to do a PhD in anthropology on stigma of genetic disease. This was the first large-scale study of what it means to be from the family of the afflicted. It's really seminal work that she did. Jorge Sequeiros goes to Porto to start his institute, and 5 years later, 10 years later, we had a series of 5-yearly workshops on Machado Joseph Disease. And at that meeting was a young PhD candidate who's at this meeting, who had come from Cuba to do her genetic counseling PhD in Porto. And at this casual, interview, we were chatting, and she said, we got this meeting in Cuba on ataxia, you should come. And I said, I'm there, what do I need to do? She said, you submit an abstract. And this is where provenance comes into the telling of these stories. I came home from that meeting, and the first patient I saw on Monday morning had SCA2. And that was the Portuguese thing. Well, what sign do you need to go to Cuba? So off I went with my other brother, and we presented, and that was fine. And I thought him in and out, goodbye. Well, one of the students approached me and started emailing, and one thing to another. Now, 10 years later, and 20 visits to Cuba, we've been very much involved in helping them set up pre-symptomatic and diagnostic testing for hereditary ataxias. And the latest thing, that should be on that list of good things, was a young MD there who wanted to do her PhD. And so she selected this large cohort, from this large cohort of Cuban families, the pediatric cases. And she just recently published successfully her PhD thesis on pediatric onset Friedreich's ataxia. And so our efforts, sort of were winding down, only just nicely winding down when the lab tells me, well, went through this and we found 9 families with SCA3. So this thing keeps going on and on and on. So when I give this talk to the students, I say, early on in your career, get a disease and stick with it, and see the world. And here I am at 75, enthusiastic about working part-time. And I was in Cuba in November again, so I would really encourage young people. It's a wonderful career path. Outside of the lab, I was commuting between Vancouver and Victoria once every 3 months to provide some clinical supervision there. And the new department head, didn't want to have anything to do with any other program in the province. And so it was either I stop doing that or leave. And so one day I got this idea in my mind, geez, I'm gonna have to leave Vancouver. That's heresy. Nobody leaves Vancouver. And that led to the snowballing effect of recruiting and Kingston, and just fell into place, effortlessly fell into place. And when those things fall into place like that, you're on the right road, so I just go with the flow. So the 3 people that really I had issues with were the department head, and then my biology colleagues, who thought DNA was their thing. And this is in the very early days. And eventually things fell apart for them, and the collaboration with Guy Rouleau took off, and it happened for a reason that there was a falling out, because that collaboration with Rouleau would have never taken place, and we would have ground along in this other relationship and not gotten anywhere. So those are 2 big setbacks or disappointments, both of which I've been able to move,
Yeah.
get around.